people like us who um, who have no real good examples for teaching how to do it.
Yeah.
We can
Yeah.
explain it, and I this
Yeah.
is why I wanted to talk to you. Santiago asks you all these questions on the forums. I mean,
Yeah.
at Addis Play, and you have answered them beautifully. And he says thank you, but you
Yeah.
are in the same trap that I sit in sorcery.
Yeah.
I went to this trap in sorcery, and
Yeah.
I never came out.
Yeah.
I never came out. I can explain it to anybody, person to
Yeah.
person. I
Yeah.
can find out what their problem is when they talk,
Yeah.
and I can say, ah, that's where you're kind of, not seeing what the words mean. Let's do this.
Yeah.
The trouble
Yeah.
is in a classroom, people are paying me to do that, and they know that they have to read the text and suffer and then come and ask. They know that.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about a game that is supposed to be played, as they say, out of the box,
Yeah.
you don't know this is a different relationship. So what?
Yeah. That's true.
And so that's where we are at. So your ability to explain it to him is not your goal here.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? I mean, that's
Yeah, because it feels that well, role-playing game in general is so complex thing. It's a really complex thing. And then there are so many different ways to play these games because uh, there are so many groups that have kind of evolved playing a game in certain ways,
mhm.
and it is not written in anywhere, and you can only maybe you can watch videos of it, but still it
It's
might be
right.
that you don't understand what's happening.
Also, there's no language for them to talk about it.
Yeah.
So or at least some of us have tried for some language in that regard, but there is resistance.
Yeah.
So uh, the idea here then is to say we are working with how people encounter your text and how they will not do a couple of things. One is to try to just force their way through it. I'm
Yeah.
just going to more effort, more talking, more
Yeah.
push. And when you give him an opportunity, like you say, well, yeah, you can walk off and do something. He runs
Yeah.
off to go do something. I
Yeah.
mean, and you're
Yeah.
kind of going, did you really want to go run off and do something?
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah,
and
I
so yeah.
completely understand. Yeah.
So there's also the problem with living in the future. To him, there's already a story in his mind later, which is I'm just
Yeah.
quoting him, right? He has all these ideas
Yeah.
for later, and it's
Yeah.
frustrating to him not to go to the later and see it happen.
Yeah.
He's because to him, story is what you give to the other people at the table,
Yeah.
and he
Yeah.
has one, and he
Yeah.
feels like the game is preventing him from
Yeah.
doing the
Yeah.
story. And so
Yeah.
this is very, very, and it is preventing him because the game says, no, you
Yeah.
don't, give
Yeah.
us your story for later.
Yeah.
You're in a
Yeah.
problem now.
Yeah. And
Um,
this kind of games work this way because if you are a game master in a very traditional game where you have some where you can railroad your story forward, you have perhaps some options for the players to do some things, and
mhm.
they choose between some things,
Right. They
and
choose Coke or
but still
Pepsi.
you,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
but still you can bring your elements in front of them wherever they go.
Exactly.
When
Yeah.
you get better and better at it, because I know, because I did it for
Yeah.
15
You.
years.
Yeah. You. Guilty.
Yeah.
This is gamers in Gamers Anonymous, like Alcoholics
Yeah,
Anonymous. My
yeah,
name is
yeah,
Ron.
yeah,
I
yeah,
railroaded for 20 years.
yeah, yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
And that is how you can do it if you must. But these kind of games, like I have to say, the games you created in the Forge, and afterwards the games like Tales of Entropy that tries to uh, capture similar ways to play.
I would
It's
say in
like
many ways,
preventing that.
continues on. I mean,
Yeah,
really, it's Tales of Entropy is an excellent design. I mean, there's
yeah,
not a question. The thing that we are really talking about is more general that is on, it's in the phenomenology, and you and I can talk about this at a more general level
Yeah.
really, really easily and probably for a long time.
Yeah.
So if we go straight to Tales of Entropy and
Yeah.
say, and you've said it. I'm not saying you haven't said it. It's a matter of when we are in the middle of it, because people will learn by doing. When
Yeah.
we are in the middle of it, what is the primary uh, way that things happen in the game? And the answer is the changing of the grains.
Mm.
It looks as though it's the burdens in
Yeah.
many ways, and that's easy to focus on and say, "Wow, my character is a cannibal," or something like
Yeah.
that. But
Yeah.
it seems to me as though the grains of the story in the long run, scene after scene after scene, the changing of the grains is really where the it's really where the story itself, the emergent story, actually occurs. Um,
Yeah.
so because the idea that a character can be eliminated from play, or sorry, eliminated from an active presence, right,
Yeah.
is is uh is fine. So it's not a a fixed goal to keep my character in the story, right? It's
Yeah.
not, you don't lay that down and say, okay, so what's my role here? It's easy to look at the rule and say, aha, um, so this is all about, it's like Survivor. We're going to vote people off the island.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Basically, it's
Yeah.
elimination.
Yeah. Yeah.
The burden and the shadow
Yeah.
are emergent effects that you are willing to live with as a player. If you're not willing to live with them, you shouldn't be playing this game.
Yeah.
This is something you should
Indeed. Yeah.
embrace. So that's
Yeah.
one thing. The
Yeah.
other is then what can you change, even when your character isn't in the story? And the answer
Yeah.
is the grains, the grains, the grains, the grains, the grains.
Yeah.
Right? And
And
so
especially you can change it when your character is not around because
that's what
that's
I
the
mean.
time when you do it. Yeah.
Of course, that is really quite important because you've been doing it the whole time. Character or
Yeah.
no character, you're
Yeah.
right. That's when you do it. So let's look at this issue of the grains. Who, regardless of whichever character lives or dies, to be simplistic about
Yeah.
it, right? Let's just say
Yeah.
lives or dies. Regardless of that, those play is when play is over, that page of grains is going to be different than when it
Yeah.
started.
Yeah.
What is it? There's two questions. One, what is it relative to the problem or situation that occurred, right? Here's the dragon.
Yeah.
What was the dragon like? What happened to the world, right?
Yeah.
Now that the what did we learn about the world and what happened to the world, um, that because of these events. The
Yeah.
other one is what kind of variables are there? You could play a game where it was almost all the grains were setting building.
Yeah.
You could play a game where almost all the grains were psychological descriptions and atmosphere.
Yes.
So that's actually kind of that to me, that what the changes are, what we discover and what happens is
Yeah.
there in the grains, and also about what kinds of variables, what is the pure stylistic content of
Yeah.
this event. So if one kind of focuses on that as where we are all going with this,
Yeah.
and even the word where is a terrible word because in English doesn't help either. In other languages, I don't know about Finnish, but in other languages you are very specific about to where.
Yeah.
Is not where is just where. To
Yeah.
where is
Yeah.
where you are
Yeah.
going. English
Yeah.
doesn't care. So
Yeah. Yeah.
um
It's
yeah.
like a target where you're
Right.
going.
And
A
that's what
specific
I'm trying
target.
to avoid. I don't want
Yeah.
the to where. I want the
Yeah.
general English vague where, which
Yeah.
can be very much a matter of now where are we? You see?
Yeah.
That's now you're right. Instead of to where, now where. Ah,
Yeah. Where? Yeah.
beautiful. I'm going to keep that,
Yeah.
right? So
That is vague. Yeah.
yeah, and so if you have that attitude, now where, um, and let it be a matter often of surprise. then the um, then the mechanisms of the grain bearer in particular can become very, very powerful and very exciting.
Yeah.
Now, you can't control for people being interested in different things,
Yeah.
but you can. But the shift from paying attention to the synopsis that we all are supposed to share when you
Yeah.
read the little piece, we are all
Yeah.
supposed to just breathe it in and own it
Yeah.
and say, this is what we're working with, this is our page. But if you dive into your character's head instead, and all you care about is what you have decided this guy wants, and then he's trying to get
Yeah.
away from all that shit
Yeah.
all the time,
Yeah. Yeah.
then either now you can't really control for that, but you can help avoid it
Yeah.
in the way that you present. So
Yeah.
there, that's why I keep saying the grains. This is, you play your character, but you are a constant grain bearer.
Yeah.
Even when you happen not to be the grain bearer of the moment, everybody is the grain bearer for real,
Yes.
right? That's
And they
that's
have like lasting effects because if you put a grain there and it is interesting somehow, other people are going to grab onto it and
mhm.
build something that is involving it. So it it can really affect the future of the story, you might say.
I would
But
say that it is the biggest thing.
yeah,
And so it's kind of tricky because it's so easy to get distracted by the burdens.
yeah,
And because they're fine too, but in a way they are they are the most dangerous thing in the game, the burdens,
yeah,
because embracing the change or the new concept of your character is a difficult, it's a difficult thing. And the big
yeah,
risk, of course, is that somebody is irresponsible or basically just bad at
yeah,
change of giving you burdens. I mean, if
yeah,
you're stuck with somebody, I don't care if they surprise me or frighten me or make me say, "Oh, that's not what I thought," if it's
yeah,
good,
yeah,
right? But that's our big risk. You can't guarantee it.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
fine. But it is kind of the standing risk in play of what will occur. Uh, if I like my character,
yeah,
and then your character becomes somebody you don't like or who is
yeah,
devalued,
yeah,
then it's very, very tricky. There are
yeah,
stories where that actually works very well, and then there are stories where it doesn't, and there's no rule,
yeah.
right?
And there is, I think, in Tales of Entropy, there is a great risk of you kind of losing at least partially the control of you, of what your character becomes.
Right, and that's not the solution is either to take it out of the game or to embrace it and say we embrace this standing uh, as our standing creative
Yeah,
opportunity and also of our standing creative risk, because you don't
it's
get great creativity without great risks. This is where it
yeah,
is, you know.
yeah, and it's a bit like I feel that uh, your relationship to your character in games like this is a bit less intense than your relation to a character in such game that you only have your character. You're in a game what a game master is controlling, and he's controlling the world, and you just live it through with your characters from day one, two, three. You play 100 games of campaign that is 100 games long, and
Yes.
you just kind of uh, he becomes a persona or something. But I feel that in games like this, I feel that my role is a bit more like a director of a movie.
Well, I agree with you in many ways, except that characters do have a way of assuming this great identity. And
Yeah,
so, and without that, the story becomes an exercise in, well, if we're talking about movies, uh, when I was young, one of the people who is considered to be one of the great innovators or the great new stylists of cinema was he was from the Coppola School of Filmmaking, and he was Brian De Palma.
yeah,
And Brian De Palma was widely regarded as, this is one of our great stylists, one of our great treasures, whatever. His movies are terrible,
yeah.
not just because of the rather cheap plot twists he throws in order to keep not telling a story, but
Oh,
instead, I'm talking about the complete superficiality and doll like manner of his characters.
oh,
They literally are pushed about from scene to scene with the decisions for why they go here and there completely opaque and just not even present,
yeah,
and their reactions largely a matter of instant theatrics.
yeah,
Um, and so, with that in mind, it's that there is such a thing as being too much of a director. You can
yeah,
push the entities around from place to place. You can
yeah,
suddenly reveal that one of them is an alien in a rubber suit,
yeah,
or you can suddenly reveal things
yeah,
and you can keep, sort of tap dancing with surprise and distractions,
yeah,
but you're not really engaging. So the characters, as a matter of advocacy, are important.
yeah,
And so one is in an
yeah. They are
interesting
very important.
balance between feeling very strongly about advocacy and also being willing to let go when it
Yeah,
happens.
yeah,
And um, and so I'm saying that what is the core value at work when you make decisions of this kind, any kind, during play? You say, I'm the narrator.
yeah,
Where will it be? You know,
yeah,
shall we shift in our game? Shall we shift to behind the mountain? Meanwhile, deep in the mountain,
yeah,
right? Things like that. Um,
yeah,
that if you yeah, meanwhile, deep in the mountain, you know, uh one of the characters wakes up, Paul's character,
yeah,
right? Paul's character, next scene, narrator says, meanwhile, deep in the mountain, Arcturus wakes up, and Paul says,
yeah,
wait, what, in the mountain? And I'm like, yes, in the mountain. So
yeah,
but the idea is that when you make decisions like that, are you being like Brian De Palma, who suddenly has another body appear in the protagonist's bed,
yeah,
you know, or are you actually working with something, not, and again, not to where,
yeah,
but this is given what we know, this is where I want to
yeah,
be.
yeah,
And so, therefore, if your dynamic is based on the burden and on shadow,
yeah,
I think that's going to make the game very, very tough for you. But if your decision is based on the grains and what has been happening to them, then those decisions become extremely easy.
yeah. I haven't ever thought about it that way, but yeah, yeah, that could work. And I think the main thing uh, in prep the prep of the game is quite long, as we have spoken before.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of things that we think about in the beginning of the game before we actually start rolling the scenes on. And I feel that kind of that is the place where we try to get to the same page with these things
I
with the
agree.
players.
And perhaps the detail of making the characters is where things are relatively excessive.
Yeah,
It may be that the it may be useful to start the characters a little more vague,
Yeah.
And so therefore, if all of their, you just say, okay, pick either one flame or one shadow as your starting, because that's all we know about the characters, just where you're shading it at this moment.
Yeah.
Just pick
Yeah.
one flame or one shadow. That's it for all characters.
Mm.
And then we'll just vote from that point on until where we go.
Yeah.
And that would save a lot of time. It would save a lot of derivation. Sunk cost matters. We spend more time making the characters than we do on setting up the grains.
Yeah.
And so, therefore, it tends to give the message that this is where the action is. While we may enjoy every aspect of advocacy for the character, and we may enjoy, I hope, every aspect of the character's success and failure, triumph and tragedy, you know,
Yeah.
moral status across the whole spectrum. While we
Yeah.
may enjoy all those things and they're extremely important, they're not the object of the game. They are a necessary and very, very important component, but they're not the object of the game in the sense of making sure my character is a hero. Well, that's too bad. Somebody else is going to throw a burden on your character and they won't be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Keeping my character alive. That's too bad. That that is, you know, we need to grieve or, cry out or say, "Oh, that's terrible" or whatever when it happens, but that is not the same thing as the object of the game.
Yeah.
And so it's there. The trouble is that you can provide all the mechanics for these things, just like the diagram that I think I made. I think I
Yeah.
did okay. You can provide all of that and then look at it and explain how it's done, explain how it's done. But what if you are grappling with the two dangers? One is to have your story where you're trying to take it, and the other
Yeah.
danger is the well, you don't even care. You're just chaos. You're just moving shit around, you know.
Yeah.
And I've seen people do that. They basically play in a game like this. They're just a force of nonsense. It's like having a bad story. It's like having an idiot in the writer's room.
Yeah.
You know, they
Yeah.
they're just shoving things around because they kind of think that if they do that, the game will pop out a story somehow.
Yeah.
And there's several problems. I mean, I think they constantly dodge the question of what kind of human agency is necessary when playing. Um, if you play now a game that I just got a bit ago, even though it's been around for a little while, but a game I just downloaded recently and would really like to play is called Lasers and Feelings. It's by John Harper.
Yeah. I know that game. Yeah.
And one of the things I'm seeing is that it's a game where I feel as though I could, first of all, I could easily care about a
Yeah.
character and about the situation. Number
Yeah.
one. Number two, when I'm in that state of caring, then my ability to cause trouble and my ability to respond to trouble is very high.
Yeah.
If I don't care and all I do is shove the mechanics around just to stir it up,
Yeah.
then I'm treating it like a friend of mine calls it a toy. He's calling it
Yeah.
just a wind up toy.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can just like make it go,
Yeah.
and and then you call it, then you say, but this was no fun, and then you say, oh, it's a bad game. You're like, no, it's no
Yeah.
fun because you did not take the role of human agency with this that is
Yeah.
important.
Yeah. And
So
there is lots of history in that because I feel that we the game Tales of 2 years, and we had really good sessions. Like we had really the emerging story was very interesting, and the characters were interesting, and we got some really nice twists, and we didn't see it coming what happened. But then there were a few times maybe tired or something, or couldn't grasp what we are going to do. I remember myself doing these toy things also,
Hmm.
and later on, I kind of think about it, and there are many ways how you can end up doing a bad move in a game like this. One is you just don't have the energy
Right.
or an idea where to go, and you just do some uh, move that you feel is powerful, but in the end it feels that you should not have done that. But also it's the background of role-playing games in general, where you play a character in a world that game master is controlling, and you kind of have borders for what you can do.
Hmm.
You have limited power as a character player, but uh, sometimes you end up in situations where the players kind of test
Right.
what these limits are, and it's an important thing to know that in games like Tales of Entropy, there are literally no limits for
Not of that
what you
kind.
can do.
Not of
Yeah,
that kind, especially.
and
You
if
know.
yeah, and if you are starting to, if your game is, if your actual play is uh, that you try to find those limits, what in any way possible, you will get really strange results.
Well, that's why I was saying that the way to focus, the variable in the game that helps people. Now, if people say, "Well, that's what I want to do and I have fun," then I would say okay. But I think
Yeah,
we can both agree, I can certainly maintain on my part that the net result isn't fun. The person walks away
yeah,
feeling frustrated and walks
yeah,
away feeling, "Well, wait a minute, what was that about?" And you're kind of like you're looking at him and
yeah,
say, "Well, that was about you. Why did you do that?" And he's going, "But I
yeah,
didn't, but he can't. He's like, but nothing stops me. What,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know. And so he so the game has to provide this anchoring sense of
yeah,
commitment to what is going on, even in
yeah,
the knowledge that what will happen is not under control.
yeah,
So the grains are the key. If we look over the grains and say, no matter what, this is what we're playing, this is what's not going to go away.
yeah,
This is what, if we remove grains, that is events, that is causes, that's things that happen, and that's okay. But the concept that that since your character is changeable, your character
yeah,
is not, your character is a bit of a mystery even to you because you never know what's about to be revealed about them.
yeah,
Because your character is also the fate of your character can be triumphant or tragic. You could be the most important character in retrospect or the
yeah,
least. All
yes,
of these things are just really, doing this, and that's one of the features of play. What
yeah,
isn't like that? What isn't like that is this was the starting grain sheet. This is what the grain sheet looks like at any moment during play. And when we are done, that's what the grain sheet looks like.
yeah,
And so if we always say, when in doubt, go back to the grains.
yeah,
Don't think about something that is not on the sheet that you want to have happen. That's somewhere you want to go. Never mind that.
yeah,
Go here and say, what is it? And the nice thing is that when you're the narrator, you don't have to please anybody.
yeah,
You can please yourself with
yes,
looking at the grain sheet. And that is a great thing.
yeah,
So if and that's great. And all of a sudden, all that power, right? Testing the limits.
yeah,
You're like, okay, yes, limit number one, what's on this sheet? Limit number
yeah,
two, you. What do you like? What do you want?
yeah,
Not even that. Better yet, what, who, please yourself, right?
yeah,
Please yourself. And that's more of a limit than
yeah,
most people think.
yeah,
It's not freedom. Please yourself.
yeah,
Make this good
yeah,
for you. And that's
yeah,
actually a really powerful limit to provide.
yeah,
With that in mind, all that other flexibility stops becoming so crazy, you know.
Yeah.
And it's so, let's see, now where instead of to where.
Yeah.
The character as the big mystery that you can't control. You are not going to be revealing this character's past. You are not going to be revealing this character's, and fate, certainly.
Yeah.
All of these things are occurring, and they are very flexible. But where is this game grounded? It's here. And it's not just when you're the narrator, it's when you're the grain bearer. So
Yeah.
when you're the narrator and when you're the grain bearer, you are able to feel grounded. You have two
Yeah.
people in every scene who, for whom that grain sheet is their standing ground, the ground they get to stand on, and it's much more solid ground than the character when they play their character. And
Yeah.
so I think that's really a good teaching concept. The thing for the person to say, well, okay, so wait, what do I do? What are my choices? They're looking at what other people are doing. They're not really understanding it. Why,
Yeah.
um, this will. There are other things to talk about. Whether you want to talk about testing limits, I was testing limits of just what is a scene, what is a narrator,
Yeah.
what is a protagonist, what is a
Yeah.
conflict, what is a turn, how do those things relate? I don't think I
Yeah.
necessarily came up with good answers for it,
Yeah.
but you can see what I did and use it as your test for how
Yeah.
you want those
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
to work.
Indeed.
Yeah,
Indeed.
and
Yeah.
that's another thing to clarify. How
Yes.
are those things? And I don't mean clarify like in an explanation. I mean clarify as teaching.
Yeah.
How does a person learn what your answer is for that? How is that
Yes.
how does that person get that? Um,
Yeah.
those are those are my consulting moments. Those are my consulting points.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
which it's it really is difficult because with Sorcerer, 3 times somebody said, different people each time, said,
Yeah.
Ron, this game is wonderful now that I understand it. This is
Yeah.
wonderful, but your text didn't help me. Your text was a pain in the ass. I suffered. I suffered.
Yeah.
Please let me rewrite it or write like a piece. So let me write my own Sorcerer explanation so
Yeah.
everybody will understand. And I
Yeah.
said, please.
Yeah.
So they got to work.
Okay.
One of them was called Sorcerer Unbound. Other people had different titles.
Yeah.
And something interesting happened. In the course of writing it, each person, particularly one, suddenly said, wait a minute, your book is fine. Everything I'm trying to say, you do have in the book.
Yeah.
And then they would get frustrated and they abandoned the project and they said, even though like all the blog work and stuff is still online and
Yeah.
is very good, in fact, it's really good, but they abandoned the project because they said the problem isn't in the book, the problem is out there, you know.
Yeah.
And now that I'm inside the book with Ron, I
Yeah.
can't talk to those people anymore.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and so I at the time, but this is the mistake. My
Yeah.
mistake was to say, okay, well, that vindicates me. My book is
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
I said, that vindicates me. You see, not my problem.
No.
And so that was my response, and it was the wrong response.
Oh.
The wrong, and there, it's true that you're not going to do it by fixing the book.
Yeah.
You need to come up with, or I needed to come up with, a pedagogy of introduction to the game among people at the table. How
Yeah.
is it done here? And you can
Yeah.
see it in some of the games. So, like they had the first session. Vincent tried very hard in Apocalypse World. He's got a whole playbook for the first session.
Yeah.
So to keep the game organizer in one spot in their mind, what are we doing with these people right here? And
Yeah.
worry about preparation for later events in play and stuff like that for
Yeah.
later. Then there's another playbook for okay, now later. So different people have
Yes.
tried to do things like this, but
Yeah.
I maintain that it is still a very poor and undeveloped piece of our culture.
Yeah.
Um, One last thing about that. I mentioned it in the Monster Hearts post that if you have, actually, I mentioned, I really want to bring this forward in some way sooner or later. If you have two people who are going to make a sandwich, but one of them is alone in their house working, needs to get a sandwich eaten, has things in their house for it, goes to the kitchen and makes it and eats it, and then gets back to work.
Yeah.
Much more interested in the work, much more interested in their coffee, you know,
Yeah.
goes that.
Yeah.
That's one person. Another person might be a food photographer working for a magazine that is
Yeah.
famous for their food photography.
Yes.
They don't just walk there and click the camera, they are
Yeah.
hired for their food photography.
Yes.
And when that person makes the sandwich, this is a completely different phenomenon. And the key
Yeah.
is that one needs to eat and the other one doesn't.
Yeah.
But there are other issues at work too, all kinds of social issues, obligations. They both have
Yeah.
obligations, and both of
Yeah.
those obligations are work oriented too.
Yeah.
The sandwich plays a role in these work obligations, but it's a completely
Yeah.
different role. They're
Yeah.
making these sandwiches for completely different reasons, human reasons that we can completely understand.
Yeah.
And yet, so nobody can turn around and tell me just make a sandwich,
Yeah.
right?
They don't even have the
Nobody
same
can tell me.
mind.
Not at
Yeah.
all. And nobody
Yeah.
can tell me either that there is obviously a manual of sandwich making that any idiot should be able to go and use,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. It's not possible
It's
to
not possible.
write it.
And
It's not
so
possible.
this is where we are at with a game like Tales of Entropy. We
Yeah.
have to frame the making of the sandwich
Yeah.
in a fashion that is appropriate for that game.
Yeah.
And so and it has to be somebody. Now get this. It may well be somebody who doesn't know what a sandwich could be for at all.
Yeah.
And so they could, because everybody needs to eat,
Yeah.
because everybody needs to, and everybody knows like what every object in the kitchen is,
Yeah.
right? That's not mysterious,
Yeah.
mostly. Um, and there may be a strange instrument here or there, right? Like a dice to some people, might be a
Yeah.
strange
Yeah.
instrument, but
Yeah.
but not very many. And so the problem that is faced by that person um, is profound.
Yeah.
If we go to art, a person who wants to be a cartoonist when he goes to cartooning school or goes to talk to the famous cartoonist, they know
Yeah.
what a cartoon is.
Yeah.
A person coming to role playing doesn't know that.
Yeah.
So it is at this point then looking at Tales of Entropy and saying, well, that's my task. There I need to build a pedagogy of my own. I
Yeah.
literally have to become I can't just explain the rules. Ron's been explaining the rules to Sorcerer successfully
Yeah.
for over, let's see, for almost 20 years now,
Yeah.
right? 1996 actually is when I released
Yeah.
the
Yeah. It's
first version.
over 20 years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
over 20 years.
Yeah.
And I have been when I get the chance to explain, I've been doing it successfully.
Yeah.
But that is not where you want to be with Tales of Entropy, right? This
That's
is a
not
different
like,
world now, and
yeah.
it's a different uh and you want more success than I had with Sorcerer, right?
Yeah.
That's actually a big deal.
Yeah.
Um I have I can give myself credit and pat myself on the back for being one of those designers who has influenced an immense amount of the hobby. and it's
Yeah.
not just the indie games, right? It's
Yeah.
I can look
Yeah.
across and I can say, wow, if my interest was legacy,
Yeah.
I have it.
Yeah.
Well, yes, but actually I am a small business owner.
Yes.
You know, I don't have that.
Yeah.
So and we all have like, spouses who would like to know, you
Yeah.
know, sooner or later they would like to know, what do they get besides legacy?
Yeah.
So I am saying uh don't okay, this is going to sound harsh. Don't be satisfied with the success of your explanations to questions online at the site.
Yeah.
That I'm not saying they were bad explanations. They were excellent
Yeah.
explanations.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great. Come join me in my little gutter. You can sit with
Yeah.
me next on the corner if you want to. Oh, you can here,
Yeah.
oh, I've got my felt. I'll get my pen. I'll make you a
Yeah.
sign too.
Yeah.
You can sit
Yeah.
here on the corner with me,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's what I'm trying to say is
A lot. Yeah.
your goal
Yeah.
is to say, let's not do that. Let's find a way for
Yeah.
Tales of Entropy to be its own mode of teaching for
Yeah.
itself. What is that? Let's go to some of the specifics. I don't mean to take your whole morning, but let's
Yeah.
go and do some specifics about the game for this kind of teaching stuff. So I'm let's say I've played a scene as my character, and I was relieved because really the only thing I know how to do in a role playing game is to play my character.
Yeah.
And there's a GM. I say, okay, well, this guy said all this airy fairy shit about groups and group creation and all that stuff. But
Yeah.
I've played a scene and I'm good because all I had to do was play my character. And this
Yeah.
guy was the GM. And so good, good. Okay. As long as it's not my turn to be narrator, I'm fine.
Yeah.
I know what to do.
Yeah.
So that person's in that state of mind. Now they're narrator.
Yeah. The world changes.
Well, it's not changing in a good way. What
Yeah.
if nobody likes my story? Where is it
Yeah.
supposed to go?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm looking for to where, and then I look and there's like nothing about that. I say, well, I better make something up that's not on the grain sheet to
Yeah.
go to. I have my character want to make a museum of wonders.
Yeah.
I'll come up with something that we're supposed to go to. Otherwise, I'm not doing my job.
Yeah.
I better come up with something.
Yeah.
And but wait, this isn't about my character. So what do I do? What do I do if it's not about my character? So
Yeah.
that's when you get this kind of stirring it up thing. Well, I'll just make something. I'll just make it crazy. I'll just make it,
Yeah.
I'll just make it nuts. I'll put your character into a situation, but I'll put my character in there too because I don't know what else to do,
Yeah.
and so I can play my character after all, right? And then
Yeah.
second, I'll you know
Jump back to
I'll
the role where you're playing your
right,
character.
exactly. Jump
Yeah.
back to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so and then the other place where that person will cause trouble, if you will, is burdens,
Yeah.
because they say, well, I'll just make things as crazy as possible with the burdens
Yeah.
because I'm desperate,
Yeah.
really. And so it's that sense of desperation and pressure that causes a detachment from what's happening, a
Yeah.
detachment and a sense of chaos and a sense of an I mean, and I've seen it in Primetime Adventures and related games.
Yeah.
Um, what's interesting with zombie cinema is that you can't do that. The game doesn't let you just start creating nonsensical things. So
Yeah.
you start trying, and the problem I've seen in that game is that people start trying to win it like a board game.
Yeah.
They start making up like what's supposed to happen, to where.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I actually had a player very angry at me one time
Ah.
because
Yeah.
he had it in his mind that in just a couple of turns, his character was going to sacrifice himself to save the rest of us. It was in his
Yeah.
head. This is going
Yeah.
to happen. And the rest of us, of course, would not cooperate. We were playing our own characters in the moment, doing the
Yeah.
things we
Yeah.
do. And he was like, "Why aren't you all helping me get you to the end of the board for that moment?"
Yeah.
And you were kind of looking, then we'll win. Then we'll win.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
it's obvious. That's the optimal strategy. We'll all get
Yeah.
to the end of the board, and then one of us sacrifice himself. It's the optimal strategy. And you're like,
Yeah.
why are you playing this like a board game to win? To
Yeah.
him, as soon as he saw those pieces and a board, he was done. That's what it was for.
Yeah. Yeah. It's only a board game, and
Right.
even zombie cinema is very focused on the issues it brings.
Right.
And even though it is very focused, still you have that problem that that role-playing problem, that what you're supposed to do.
Well, what
In
is this for?
Entropy is
Right.
it's much more diverse. Like it's not so coherent somehow.
Well, it's not so constrained,
Yeah,
in its
yeah,
problem, and
yeah. That's what I
or
meant.
its immediate situations.
Yeah,
The rules in zombie cinema, the rules say there is a problem with access. There is a
yeah,
problem with getting caught in tight spaces now.
yeah,
Whatever it is, make that happen.
yeah,
And so I'm saying that in Tales of Entropy, I agree with you that the more wide open creative situation is a great thing, but it is that sense of desperation and chaos that occurs that we're
yeah,
trying to avoid. We're trying to say, let's not, let's, yes, put people in the pressure of creativity. This is going to be your sandwich.
yeah,
But if they don't know whether they're either of those two sandwich makers,
yeah,
then that's just the freedom is impossible. Impossible.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
they would be fine if there was only one way to make that sandwich and you just walked right through it because they are just saying, well, then the purpose must be it must be somewhere. There must be a purpose for this. They're telling me to follow these exact steps. There
yeah,
must be a purpose here somewhere. But when
yeah,
you put them in a situation where they have to investigate their own purpose or the shared purpose in order to make a decision, it is a great thing. It is the essence of folk story creation. It is the essence of doing things with fiction that are not the way most people are familiar with it.
yeah,
But it is also an unknown world
yeah,
of facing your own expectations, facing your own desires for what a sandwich is for.
yeah,
That is, it's it must be taught in the moment, not just learned procedurally, but
yeah,
taught in the moment
yeah,
as what we're here for. And um, it is there. And I brought up that problem with zombie cinema because you can't get a game which is more procedurally clear.
yeah,
And
yeah,
yet we had two completely different sandwich makers at the
yeah,
table.
yeah, yeah,
Well, actually, we had 4 or 5 people playing and one person who was absolutely convinced what the sandwich was for
yeah, yeah,
and was confused about why the rest of us were so bad at this game,
yeah.
and he was angry
Oh,
at us. He was like, why am I playing with these people who obviously are not committed to what we're here for,
yeah,
and we were just, what
yeah. Watching a different kind of sandwich being
more.
made.
And unfortunately, since he was trapped with the rest of us,
Yeah,
watching him become, and it was impossible. And he was a
yeah,
bit of a passive aggressive person, so we didn't know how
yeah,
upset he was until afterward.
yeah, yeah. I've faced similar situations. Actually, once I played your game Slay with Me. Uh, it was through a text medium, not like we played in with Aero, but through IRC, internet relay chat, like chatting.
Yes.
And we played first session, and he was he was the character player, and I was the
Yeah.
world
I
where
I and you. I know.
yeah, I and you, yeah, and I had like this is great stuff, and for me it worked very well. And afterwards, the feeling I talked about him, how was it, and because he had been only playing like games, traditional role playing games before that, and the end was nearly telling me that I'm a school bully or something. Like he really he felt that it was horrible because he kind of was stuck in only uh, explaining thematic pieces of his character, and I kind of slowly drive the monster thing in, and it was not nearly even half away uh, for the entire game, but still this is an example of we making completely different sandwiches in the same. He wanted to explain his feelings about his character and what he was like. And I was about that, yeah, you have this curse that has fallen on top of your family, and now it's slowly driving
Right.
forward to
Right.
against you.
Right. And so it's actually quite tricky because uh the essence of that game is
Yeah,
that you would be expressing your character as the outcomes of what you say. I mean, you would say what your character does, and it would very much reveal things about
yeah,
your character.
yeah,
So there's plenty of
indeed.
room to do that, but
Yeah,
there's no room for taking your turn and just reflecting.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
you're just going, you're asking for disaster. The
yeah,
other
yeah,
person,
yeah. You're
the other
driving
person is just going to
for
build up their dice and have
trouble.
a wonderful
Yeah, yeah,
time,
yeah,
making your life miserable. And
yeah,
you're going to lose your, if you don't lose your life, you're going to lose your soul, or you're going to lose,
yeah,
half your body suddenly is eaten by a demon or something, or
yeah,
and the
yeah,
lover's going to die, and your family's going to die, and all those things. Quit,
yeah, indeed. And
quit
we
talking, for
didn't
God's
get,
sake. Strike back.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
and we didn't get nearly even near of that stuff.
right,
Like we are just beginning this, and I decided that yeah, maybe we'll end.
right,
We
right, just
stop there because it's not going to end well if we
right,
continue like
right,
this. It's not
right.
useful.
So this is kind of an important point. I have been writing about the sandwich making since
Yeah,
1999, and
yeah,
we have yet to come up with a really good way to talk about it. And the solution that I've learned fairly recently is that a book isn't going to do it.
yeah,
A book, you can say, how come a role playing game doesn't play like a board game? How come you can't
yeah,
just take it out of the box and do it? And the
yeah,
answer is because everybody at the table knows what a board game is.
yeah,
Everybody knows what the sandwich is for, right? And
yeah,
they're very interested in this interesting tool for it,
yeah,
but they aren't having a problem with what it's for, even if what it's for is very, very human and understandable,
yeah,
which it is. The different things that these things can be for are very human and understandable. But just because they're human and understandable doesn't mean that you can't get into trouble. Those two different sandwiches, if the guy who is running off to work somewhere with his cup of coffee takes a bite into that sandwich, one, he's going to ruin the photograph.
yeah,
Two,
yeah,
it may not taste good.
yeah,
Nobody made that sandwich to eat it, right? I mean,
yeah,
and vice versa. I mean, the sandwich the guy makes for his lunch, I mean, by the time the guy's there with his photograph, say, okay, we're ready for the shot, wait a minute, what happened to it? And the guy's like, I ate it, I'm over here working, drinking my coffee, what the hell's wrong with you? And so and besides, it was ugly. I mean, when the guy gets his picture of it, he's like, that's shit, I can't use this.
yeah,
And so
yeah,
the issue, though, is really we're really going to have to work on this. Tales of Entropy is already published, and I don't
yeah,
know if you want to rewrite or anything, because that's death, and there's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with the text. I
Yeah.
say it isn't about a rewrite. The text is
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
The issue
And there
is
is also one problem. If I'm kind of interested in getting people uh, to get to know the game, and if no there are no people like getting the game from or reading it, it doesn't really even matter if the
no, of
text
course
is
not.
wrong or
Exactly.
right.
So
Yeah.
this is something that's worth coming up with. What then is a play pack?
Yeah.
Historically, a play pack is for people who already understand the game.
Yeah.
Well, let's reverse that. Let's have the play packs be for people who don't.
Yeah.
What would it look like then? What would it look like in terms of, instead of a module that you can take the engine of the game and slot the module in, which is kind of what your current play packs are like, your current,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is fine. I
Scenarios
mean,
are like
and
that.
and
Yeah.
that's fine because I had my goal in Sorcerer in before I got trapped by books and supplements and stuff like that. I instead of being, when instead of I ended up writing some pretty good supplementary books for Sorcerer, but that's what they are. They're good supplements for people who get the
Yeah.
previous one,
Yeah.
but they're not introductory play packs.
Yeah.
They are in for people who don't get it. And
Yeah.
that is, if I were to say consulting wise, my consulting advice is your task would be to come up with an introductory play pack for people who don't get it, and I include everybody at the table.
Yeah.
And so that even the person, you can say, well, the one person does have the book. Yeah, but that person is still uncertain and is going to try to learn it for real while playing it. So
Yeah.
that person is in the very, very dangerous situation of being the student
Yes.
trying to understand it at the same
Yeah.
time as they're trying to be the teacher trying to teach it,
Yeah.
as well as the practitioner trying to do it.
Yeah.
Imagine if you were a scientist and you were a learning graduate student who's still very uncertain about, running an experiment from
Yeah.
scratch, not,
Yes.
but you are also trying to teach a bunch of other people who have a head full of misconceptions.
Yes.
They're not empty. And you're actually trying to, at the same time as you're doing these very things, you're trying to do it by running a real experiment, not a mock experiment.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're trying to be that person.
Yeah. Lots of things you have to do at
That's
the
it
same time, and
Yeah, and so that
yeah.
it really is very, very difficult. And I think that you would say, okay, with Tales of Entropy, which unlike many games is in fact an extremely powerfully and focused design that can do this,
Yeah.
with Tales of Entropy, what item do I give this group?
Yeah.
And you can say one person probably has the book so they can look up stuff,
Yeah.
but it needs to be a thing that they've got that is what they're going to use through the course of playing this. And
Yeah.
I would say the conceptual grounding is the grains. That if the conceptual
Yeah.
grounding is the characters, then all those other problems will start appearing
Yeah.
due to where different people are at, where their minds are.
Yeah.
So does that help a little bit as as our kind of a
Yeah.
consulting point, I guess?
Yeah. 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 And one has to like in the end of the game book there are these uh, one would call advanced stuff, but I kind of realized now that there is some information I probably should condense to a small bits of
Right.
text idea what the players, for example narrator, what he can do when he's making up a scene. These really simple things like uh, see what you have your character that is supposed to be in the scene. You could write narrate a scene about him trying to get what he wants. There's like a, but it's there are long chapters of text uh, like discussing about this,
Right, as
but
opposed to
maybe
just
it,
procedural
yeah, it
this and that.
should be
Right,
like
right,
very small, like short guidelines, just like the flame and shadow is like you
right,
vote flame if you like, if you think the character is in the spotlight, and you give shadow if you hated what he did.
right, right.
Yeah,
And so the notion of it as a fairly accessible procedure rather than being an advanced theoretical reflection,
yeah, yeah,
right, is
yeah.
is a good one.
And the
Yeah,
grains one is exactly like this, that if you if you are going to be a narrator, look at the grain sheet and what is there, and see if you can make a scene about uh, enriching some of it
right.
what
And I
is
and I
there.
like the idea of doing that instead of worrying about what another character wants because you are not the player of that character. And so
Yeah,
you're trying to read that guy's mind and see what, okay, what does that guy want for his character? And then
yeah,
you see you're trying to please him or accommodate him in some way. Forget all
yeah,
that. Looking at the grains, you say, what please me? What's the grain
yeah,
that I like? What's the grain that I
yeah,
really, what are the ones that I enjoy? Let's put some pressure on those. And then you look around
yeah.
and
You
say,
can,
who would put the most pressure on those? Or who's
yeah,
involved with those? Or
yeah.
who's going
You
to be
can bring it
affected by
forward.
those, receive pressure from them?
Yeah,
Then you pick the
yeah,
character. And it's
yeah,
much easier that way. And you don't have to worry about what that character wants. You don't have to
yeah,
worry about giving them something or taking something away from them. All you have to do is say, no, I'm going to please myself with these grains. And you're the character who does that.
yeah,
You're the character by which that makes the most sense or is the most fun for that. And
yeah.
I think that that's a
And
much easier anchor for
yeah,
you when you play.
yeah. But concerning the characters, it's like the guidelines are more like something that you are all aware of based on the beginning preparation, that
Right,
this is an enemy of this character. So
right. Well, you see,
based on
again,
that,
you may have noticed that I keep trying to make that a softer and less important
yeah,
feature, and you might be wondering why. But Ron, that's what we use. And I'm saying, actually, if you use those, then you go into that weird world where you're supposed to care about your character and not care about your character. That's
ah,
so hard
yeah,
to explain or
yeah,
understand. So
yeah,
if you let's not make people walk into that mindset where they don't know if to care or not to care.
yeah,
Let's instead go to the mindset of the grains. And you know what? All that stuff about the characters, their burdens increasing and changing, their flame and shadow changing, their what they want being established or changing. All of those things will happen.
mm,
You don't
yeah,
need to if you get people thinking about those for scene framing, they will just suddenly go into paralysis because they'll either
yeah,
come up with later goals or they'll create chaos. Go to the grains. Go to the
yeah,
grains, please yourself, pick a character that will be just right for that. All that other stuff will happen.
yeah,
And I think and letting those be effects rather than causes for the narrator and for framing and for stating character actions and things.
yeah,
And that way you won't have any of these tedious discussions about, well, wait a minute, I need to narrate, what does your character want? And then everybody's just talking, you
yeah,
know, and which
yeah,
is worthless for this game.
yeah,
So those are kind of my thoughts, and hopefully
yeah,
we'll see if it produces something interesting. I'm sure it will. Um, I've seen some really good outcomes for directions story play. BPG has really changed up how he wants to present the game at that level, and he hasn't changed. Well, he actually did change a couple of rules. His game was in a more of a flexible state, but that's not really. I'm not really talking about changing the rules. It's talking about the encounter with the game,
yeah,
and
yeah,
that to
and
me is more and more and more becoming the essence of the consulting.
yeah,
um, the because that's the big unknown. That's the big unknown world. That's the big world where even an attempt to do that has gained Vincent an amazing following with his Apocalypse World,
Yeah. Yeah.
just because he tried.
Yeah.
Um,
Indeed.
and I completely failed. I mean, a person asked me a question on Out to Play about Sorcerer, and I completely failed. I have to apologize to that person and start all over with a new post
Okay.
because I've completely failed to answer him, and I did not serve his needs at all.
Yeah.
And so I think I'm going to have to make a little video. It's the only,
Yeah.
yeah, to
Video you can like,
right,
but this focusing on the grains, it could be easily tested out. For example, in our next game,
yeah,
if we want.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I completely
And
agree.
we
The
can.
next session we say, you know what,
Yeah.
we're doing a little bit of an experiment here. Let's focus
Yeah.
on the grains and
Yeah.
see if it helps everybody be, well, I hate the phrase because it's overused, but really literally on the same page,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
not that bad a phrase in this case.
Yeah.
Uh, thanks,
Okay.
Kateri. Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. It
All
was
right.
nice.
I agree. It's really always a
Yes.
pleasure. Take care. Bye.